You know, long before the White Witch Jadis declared herself to be Queen of Narnia, she was actually ruler of another empire known as Charn. And every time I seem to talk about the magician's nephew, I get request after request asking me to talk more about Charn. And today is the day. We're going to take some time today. We're going to explore the lore behind Charn, the things that we know, the things that we don't know. We're also going to talk about Charn's history, the rise and decline and downfall ultimately of the civilization. And then we're also going to take a look at how Charn's legacy actually impacted the world of Narnia. And then finally, we're going to take a deeper look behind the scenes and talk about the intention that C.S. Lewis had when he wrote this story of Charn, what his influences were, what he was trying to communicate. It's going to be a fascinating dive, and we're going to get to it soon. But first, I have to remind you, this is the last week for you to register for the Golden Bookshelf. And if you haven't done it, you need to do it as soon as possible. And what is a golden bookshelf? Well, this is an idea that C.S. Lewis himself embraced. And the idea is that there should be a particular set of books that are so rich and so full of layered meaning that you don't just read them once in your life, you continue to return to them time after time. And as you grow, the books continue to reveal deeper layers of meaning to you, helping reveal new insights and helping you in turn grow as a person. Now, our sponsors of today's video, Boyce College, believe that a golden bookshelf is something that is important for everyone who wants to grow as a reader, and they want to help you get started with your own golden bookshelf starter set. I put the link in the description below, and if you go to this website, not only can you register to win this amazing book set and some great Boyce College swag, but there are also some incredible resources that they have put together just for you, the Into the Wardrobe viewers. So time is running out and registration will close at the end of the month. So right after this video, go to the webpage, register, and enjoy the resources that have been given for you. And as always, I want to talk to my Patreon members right now and tell you thank you for your support this last month. You know, as this channel was hacked and we weren't sure what was going to happen, I got some encouraging, wonderful words from you, and I'm so thankful not only for the way that you support this channel financially, but the way that you encourage me to continue to make the most out of what we're doing here. So thank you. Well, we have got a lot to cover today, so let's get started. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and step into a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. You know, I think one of the main reasons that people find Charn so fascinating is because it really is so mysterious. In just a few short pages, this entire world is laid out before us, with very detailed descriptions of very small areas and so many more questions that are left behind. And to be honest, there are a lot more questions than answers, but let's talk about what we do know. So first of all, what exactly is Charn? Well, if you've watched some of my videos in the past, I have to be honest and admit that I have incorrectly referred to Charn as a planet. It's not. Now, it is another world. In fact, it's in another solar system and probably another dimension. But Charn itself is a city. Now, it's not just a city. In fact, it's described as the greatest city not only in the world, but possibly in the entire universe. And beyond that, Charn is really more like an empire. Many other civilizations and cities have been conquered by the rulers of Charn. Now, as far as we know, the only means of access from our world to Charn was through the wood between the worlds. And when Diggory Kirk and Polly Plummer stepped through the pool into Charn, it was described as truly an otherworldly experience. Now, the first thing that they noticed was actually the quality of light on the planet. It was described as having a sort of red cast, making everything appear to be deep red. The light was also described as being eerily dull, almost like a solar eclipse was taking place, or a storm cloud was gathering in the middle of the day, but the sky itself was actually cloudless and dark blue, so dark that it was almost black. Now, in addition to this, on the horizon was a giant red sun, much bigger and much more red than our sun, which indicated that this planet was much older than our planet. And finally, Diggory described the planet as incredibly quiet. Not a warm sort of quiet like the wood between the worlds, but a cold, dead silence. And we'll find out why in just a few minutes. So this was an obviously ancient and abandoned world, and not just the planet itself, but the civilization as well. The city that they were in was obviously a very old city that had been abandoned for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The buildings themselves seemed to be in pretty good shape, not totally in ruin, but crumbling and maybe in the process of collapse. Now, the interesting thing is there was an obviously palpable sense that the city was filled with magic, and this magic seemed to be preserving some of the aspects of architecture and some other things that we'll talk about in a minute. But the most notable thing about this city was its sheer scale. Now, Jadis herself, as I mentioned before, described this as the greatest city not only in the world, but quite possibly in the universe. And standing out over a precipice, looking as far as the eye could see, all the way to the horizon, were great ancient buildings. There were towers and temples and pyramids and even bridges. This was a city that had obviously grown over centuries, if not millennia. And yet, something terrible, something obviously catastrophic, had taken place here. There was a great river that had once flowed through the empire's capital, but had now completely dried up. But the most obvious sign of catastrophe was that there was simply no life apparent anywhere, not even an ant. Whatever had taken place here, it had obviously wiped out all biological life, save for one, which we'll talk about in a minute. However, it may not have wiped out every conscious entity, and I talk about that in a couple of videos, which I will put in the description below, but be warned, even the titles give away some of those spoilers. For now, let's move on and let's talk about the rise and fall of Charnian civilization. First of all, given the sheer size and grandeur of the city, it's obvious that this was once a thriving, advanced civilization that was around for a very, very long time. Now, one of the odd things about Charn is that given the advanced civilization on a very, very old planet nearing the end of its life, you would expect that there would be much more evidence of technological advancements. But during the time of the fall of Charn, they were still using things like wheels and building buildings with stone. They didn't even have glass in their windows. Where were the flying cars? Where were the computers? Where were the holograms? None of that existed on this planet. Now, there are a few theories on why this may be the case, some of them similar to the ancient advanced civilization theory of our world. The idea that the planet itself may have gone through a series of great advancements and great catastrophes, and that Charn was simply in the middle of a great reset. But I think that one of the more compelling explanations is that ever since the beginning of the Charnian Empire, it was a civilization that was highly skilled and dependent upon the use of magic. And in a society where magic rules, quite literally, there is much less need for things like technological advancement. One of the things that we know about Charnian magic, interestingly enough, is that it seems only the nobility or the royals were actually able to control and possess magical abilities. Now, we don't know if this was a chicken or the egg situation, if they became noble because they possessed magical powers, or if by virtue of being nobility, they were given or passed along these magical powers. But the fact remains that only the royal family of Charn actually possessed magic abilities. And we know that this magic was very powerful and, for at least a time, was treated with great respect. In fact, at one point in Charnian history, the nobility of Charn even made a pact not to engage in the most destructive kinds of magic. Now, this pact was ultimately broken, and as you'll see in a minute, I think you'll understand why that may have been inevitable. I think Diggory and Pauly's discovery of the ancient Hall of Royals may have explained it best. Down both sides of this giant room, a long row of lifelike statues depicted all the royalty of Charnian history. The likenesses of the first statues that they came upon seemed to be full of joy and kindness and warmth. These were happy rulers. As they progressed, they noticed that the attitudes of the statues seemed to change. The next group was described as being the kind of people you'd want to watch your manners around, much more haughty and separated from the common man. And finally, the last group seemed to be completely wicked and also completely miserable. It may be telling that the hallway itself was designed to hold many more statues, but those statues would never be placed. The final statue was, of course, not a statue at all. It was the final queen of Charn, Jadis herself, who had placed herself in an enchanted state of suspended animation. Now, as the wickedness of Charnian nobility grew from generation to generation, with Jadis being the most wicked of all, a certain despotic, totalitarian mindset set into Charnian nobility. According to their worldview, nothing was more important in the entire universe than the rulers themselves. The common citizen of Charn only existed to serve the nobility. On their own, they had no value. The ruler was everything, and everything else was meaningless. And it's because of that worldview that we can understand what exactly took place at the last Battle of Charn and why it may have been inevitable. The Great Battle of Charn was a civil war that took place between Jadis and her sister, and it was said that this was such a terrible battle that the river of Charn itself ran red with the blood of those who served at the disposal of Jadis and her sister. And in the end, after all of Jadis's forces had been killed, she made the final decision to utter the deplorable word. And in an instant, every biological creature on the planet, and possibly the universe, was destroyed, except for Jadis herself. And it was also at that moment that she realized her final mistake. You see, while she was also the victor, she realized that without anyone to rule, she really was no ruler at all. And so, rather than live the rest of her life alone on a desolate planet, she put herself in that state of suspended animation, awaiting the day when someone would stumble into her world and awaken her, helping her escape into new worlds and new civilizations that she could conquer. And that's exactly what happened. When Diggory Kirk and Polly Plummer stumbled into Charn and rang the enchanted bell, awakening Jadis, she was able to escape with the help of their magic rings, first into the wood between the worlds, and finally into the newly created land of Narnia. And as they stood there in the wood between the worlds, they watched as the portal to Charn began to shrink, shriveling up until it dried up completely, and thus Charn itself had been annihilated, and it was no more. Now, even though Charn was destroyed, its legacy continued in Narnia, due in no small part to the fact that Jadis herself had brought evil into the new world. But even more importantly, I believe, the history of Charn was preserved. It may be likely that while still in Narnia, Diggory passed on everything he knew about Charn to King Frank, who in turn would pass it along to his successors, as sort of a cautionary tale for what may happen to a world when its rulers abandon virtue in exchange for wickedness. And of course, it should be noted that in the end, Narnia did not follow the same path as Charn. Throughout all its ups and downs, there always remained in Narnia an ember of life that maintained goodness and virtue and faith in Aslan, even until the very end. So what accounts for this big difference? Why did Narnia succeed in enduring while Charn failed? Well, I think that the answer could be found in the writings of one of C.S. Lewis's greatest influences, G.K. Chesterton. It was actually this book, entitled The Everlasting Man, that C.S. Lewis himself said had a profound impact on him while he was still an atheist, struggling to find truth. In this book, Chesterton posits that no ruling class would ever contain in and of themselves enough virtue to prevent the decline and eventual fall of any society. It's only by God's divine intervention that a society can not only avoid decline, but can also thrive. And interestingly enough, that may be the difference that we're meant to see between Charn and Narnia. You see, Charn was a desolate place, a place with only a ruler who could depend on themselves to maintain civilization, and ultimately they failed. How was Narnia different? Well, quite simply, Narnia had Aslan. The rulers of Narnia didn't have to depend on themselves or their own virtue in order to maintain the peace and the prosperity of Narnia. In fact, more often than not, they depended on Aslan to show them virtue, to guide them, and to lead them. And so, whether it's in Narnia or in our world, we can be thankful that our hope and our faith does not have to be placed on the powers and the principalities of this world. Instead, we can place our trust in the greater power, the power that isn't safe, but it's good, because He's the King, I tell you.